The Galactic Council's chamber hovered in silence, stretched across a cradle of artificial gravity suspended above a dying star. Golden orbs of light floated lazily, casting soft glows against the obsidian metal walls. Delegates from 36 empires sat on their thrones, scaled, feathered, tentacled, crystalline, each species more ancient than the last. They had ruled this quadrant for millennia. They did not expect company. The presiding speaker, Zelek of the Hive Intellect Fralnock, stirred first. Its voice was not spoken but broadcast telepathically, reverberating into the cortex of every mind present. The subject of Earth. Is it agreed that annexation proceeds without response? A ripple of clicks and nods passed across the chamber. The Empire had determined Earth to be pre-FTL, socially fragmented, and intellectually volatile. There had been minor disturbances, resistance by local militias, planetary interference, but the assessment remained. Earth was an evolutionary cul-de-sac. Then something crashed onto the platform, metal buckled. The chamber's gravity shields flexed for the first time in centuries. Every delegate turned as if one. A vessel, if it could be called that, stood where protocol forbade unannounced arrival. The hull was scorched black, scarred with acid burns and impact craters. Welded panels bore human script. Ranger 1, an access hatch hissed open. No atmospheric adaptation, no apologies. 5 humans stepped out. They were dressed in a bizarre mix of archaic combat armor and battlefield gear, dusty, blood-streaked, smelling faintly of ozone and smoke. One of them carried a case shaped like a coffin, dragging it behind him with no ceremony. The others wore weapons openly. The alien guards didn't move. They hadn't been ordered to. The man in front stopped at the center of the chamber. He had no translator node, no insignia, only a voice. Commander Elias Cade, Earth's response delegation. He surveyed the room, the corners of his mouth twitching. Heard you were discussing our extinction. Thought we'd drop by? The silence was so dense it became physical. Sialek's voice entered Cade's mind like a needle. You breach the Council's sanctum. You insult its ritual. You bring weapons, unregistered, unsanctioned, and a war vehicle? Cade nodded toward the object they arrived in. Tank. The speaker blinked. A what? Tank, Cade repeated. Bloodstained, runs on borrowed tech and spite. We figured it'd make a decent opener. Viceroy Thakan of the Kephalanoid Empire stood from his elevated dais, towering above the others, tendrils unfurling in regal outrage. Human! You do not understand what you desecrate. Cade tilted his head, unbothered. I think we understand perfectly. You called us primitives, said we weren't fit for space. Then you torched our cities from orbit, thought we'd lay down and vanish. He kicked open the coffin case. A line of metallic objects clattered across the chamber floor. Helmets, claws, armor fragments, tags written in alien script. Some still had dried ichor. Cade looked up at the Khan. We thought it was time you met the people who collected these. A whisper broke out among the delegates. Identifiers scrolled across internal data feeds. The items belonged to elite commanders from Council-affiliated extermination units, units that had vanished in Outer Rim operations. The assumption had been pirates or entropy. No, Zelek whispered through the network. No species adapts this fast. Cade caught that one. Funny. That's exactly what the Varneth said, just before we turned their orbital shipyards into scrap. He stepped forward. The guards didn't stop him. They hadn't received a threat profile high enough to act. That would change soon. We're not diplomats. We're not here to apologize. We're here to let you know that Earth is still standing. He paused. You sent 9 fleets. We buried 8. The 9th's about to wish they hadn't switched to low orbit. The Khan descended from his platform with slow, calculated menace. You bring war into peace. You desecrate a council chamber. You believe your violence grants you power? Cade didn't flinch. Violence didn't give us power. It revealed yours was just theater. He reached into a pouch and dropped a black cube on the floor. It blinked once, then projected a holofeed, a shaky camera angle, a trench of charred soil, a Council Titan unit, 12 meters tall, quadrupedal, gleaming with plasma weaponry, reeling. Backward as a human tank drove through its core, dragging entrails made of cabling and coolant lines. They said tanks were obsolete, Cade said. Then we made them run on phase-reactive alloys and had the AI take driving lessons from demolition derby champions. The delegates weren't silent anymore. They were angry, confused, fractured, a being from the null species, silicate-based, and historically neutral, pulsed with concern. You refused all communication for 16 lunar cycles. You abandoned our peace envoys. Your species severed diplomacy. Cade nodded. You shelled our skies. Your peace envoys showed up with targeting drones. We stopped answering because we stopped pretending, Zielik pulsed again, more forcefully. You do not comprehend the implications of defying the unified galactic order. Earth was classified as level 0 threat. You should not have risen this far. A grin twitched at the edge of Cade's mouth. Well, that's the thing. You keep mistaking defiance for ignorance. That's how empires fall. The doors behind Cade hissed again. Another tank rolled in, this one quieter, smaller, more refined, painted with names, cities, coordinates, battle dates. Along its turret were handprints in blood, some large, some small. An alien delegate near the back, scaled and translucent, recoiled. That's not a weapon. That's a memorial. Cade turned to face them all. His voice dropped in tone, soft, but sharp. You tried to erase us, so we built a reminder. A second cube was dropped. This time a projection of Earth's surface. It showed craters, ruins. Then new cities built in concentric circles around old war zones. Human survivors training beside repurposed alien tech, fleets, drones, orbital cannons mounted on old skyscrapers. You didn't end us, Cade said. You evolved us. The Khan's posture wavered, just slightly. What do you want, human? Cade's gaze cut like glass. We want you to understand we're not applying for membership. We're announcing our presence. Zielik's voice trembled beneath the surface. You think this display grants you dominance? Cade shrugged. No, but it gives you a choice. Keep coming, and you'll keep losing. Stop, and maybe, we can talk later. After we've finished collecting all your flags. A flicker passed between council members. The Hive, the Empire, the core systems. For the first time in recorded memory, they did not move as one. The tank's comm system clicked online. A voice filtered through. Female, calm, American accented. Clipped with military precision, Commander, priority message, the 9th Fleet just broke orbit, permission to intercept. Cade turned his wrist over, tapped a control surface on his sleeve. Do it. There was no ceremony, no warning, just an acknowledgement. Then silence. He looked up at the stunned council. You invaded Earth with fire. We responded with steel. Now we're here to return the favor, the Khan stepped back. Not out of fear, but out of something else, something he couldn't name yet. Perhaps it was uncertainty. Perhaps, deep in the marrow of his bones, it was the first breath of fear. Zielik spoke again, its mental cadence cracking like fractured glass. This meeting will be recorded as a violation of council protocol and declared an act of war. Cade stared at him. That's fine. We've already started drafting the sequel. Then he turned, walked back toward the tank, and climbed aboard without another word. The other humans followed, silent, disciplined, implacable. As the tank reversed into its original impact crater, the chamber remained in stunned silence. A message appeared in holographic script, left behind by the humans. Translated automatically. In every dialect. You thought Earth was a mistake. Turns out we're your reckoning. And then they were gone. The atmosphere aboard the Ranger 1 was tense, not with fear, but with precision. Inside the cramped command cabin, cables pulsed with heat, and every surface hummed under layered upgrades. The hull may have looked like scrap, but beneath it lived. A predator born of desperation and genius. Commander Elias Cade leaned against the forward console, watching the readout of Earth's low-orbit battlefield unfold in red and amber. 7th Cruiser just blinked off, came a voice from behind. It belonged to Quan, the tank's AI-augmented weapons engineer. hunched over a console modified from a salvaged alien core. His fingers danced across the screen, rerouting fire control to autonomous drones orbiting a scorched moon. That's 3 capital kills in under 2 minutes. We're officially a myth to them now. Cade didn't smile. We're a case study in miscalculation. Keep the pressure. Don't let them regroup. Beside Quan, Sergeant Isaac Granger, the team's oldest member and ex-Special Forces, adjusted the strap on his exosuit. He was quiet by nature, but deadly in efficiency. His cybernetic leg hissed softly as he moved to join Cade. They're panicking. Sectors 12 through 14 just started broadcasting conflicting orders, multiple species issuing overrides. Let them, Cade said. The more confused they get, the harder we hit. Granger paused. You think the Council will send reinforcements? They're not ready to admit we're real, Cade said, checking the uplink with Earth Command. Which means they're going to keep bleeding ships until someone gets desperate enough to ask who we are. Behind them, Lieutenant Reva McKay ran diagnostics on the fusion battery cradled beneath the tank's midsection. She had been a robotics engineer before the war, now a field mechanic capable of welding together alien tech with duct tape and grit. We're running hot. I need 10 to swap coolant systems before we turn this thing into a crater. You've got 7, Cade said. We drop again in 8. As McKay disappeared beneath the chassis, Cade moved back to the cockpit and activated the external cam. The Ninth Fleet hovered above Earth like an executioner's blade, sleek, silver, and arrogant. But their formations were off. Human jamming arrays built from twisted alien debris were already splintering their coordination. Fragmented chatter leaked through. Signal corrupted. Targeting lock lost. Who is this? How are they? A blinking alert interrupted. Then a voice, garbled but unmistakable. Alien, but different from the ones before. Calm. Singular. This is Warden Kexel of the Inner Flame Armada. You have boarded and desecrated a galactic sanctum. You are now classified as a Class 3 contamination. Identify yourselves, Cade tapped the transmitter. This is Elias Cade of Earth's 3rd Resistance Division. Congratulations. You're our 100th kill today. There was a pause. No reply. Still there? Cade continued. I was hoping for a little more righteous indignation. Quan chuckled dryly. He's still processing the words of Earth. It'll hit in a second. Earth? The voice repeated at last, slow and halting. That planet is under lockdown. Pre-spaceflight. Contained. Yeah, Cade muttered. That's how you lost. Warden Kexel did not respond again, but moments later the Ninth Fleet repositioned. Shields flared, weapon systems activated. A phalanx of carriers peeled off and began descent maneuvers. Cade's eyes narrowed. They're deploying surface. Breakers, he said. They want to end this from orbit, wipe everything. Granger tapped into the atmospheric readings. 2 minutes before they cleared trajectory, Cade opened the interlink to Earth Command. This is Ranger 1, requesting uplink to Black Site Haven. A new voice filtered through. General Delaney, one of the few humans who had survived the first wave and lived long enough to fight back with strategy, not just rage. Uplink granted. Authority code Delta 9 Sigma. You sure about this, Elias? Cade glanced at the orbital feed. Let's show them what a pre-spaceflight civilization can really do. He tapped a hidden panel. A dormant relay pulsed to life. All across Earth's surface, old satellites, once communication tools, now repurposed weapons, blinked awake. The ground split open in forgotten ruins, revealing cannons that had never been listed on any formal treaty. Humanity had not been idle during its so-called containment. Energy surged from multiple continents. High atmosphere tremors shattered clouds. The first blast struck the forward cruiser of the Ninth Fleet, slicing through shields as if they were paper. The second detonated above the fleet's command barge, severing command relays and blinding support vessels. Then the tanks came. Not just Ranger 1, there were others now, crawling out of hangars beneath the oceans, rolling through jungles under solar camo, rising from mountain bunkers buried for decades. Each one hand-built, armor-forged from grief and vengeance, coated. In kill tallies and names long turned to ash. Cade watched it all from the cockpit. You wanted to see what Earth had left. The next wave of drones dropped from the stratosphere, human-engineered from the skeletons of captured scouts. They did not look elegant. They looked angry. Spikes of metal, scorched engines, ducted thrusters that spat fire as they tore through capital ships like wasps through wax. On the alien comms, chaos bloomed. Unidentified ground batteries. Multiple. Surface anomalies. They shouldn't have these capabilities. In the Council's distant core, the delegates were already receiving reports. Dozens of empires, each with centuries of dominance, were watching their fleets vanish. Zielek stood paralyzed. No algorithms had predicted this. No simulations had accounted for retaliation this adaptive, this emotional. Is this doubt? The Hive Queen whispered into its own mental thread. Back in orbit, Warden Kexel's voice returned, but it had changed. No longer confident. Measured now. Fragile. How did your species develop this quickly? You were still killing each other. Your unity ratio was below 70%. You were not ready. Cade leaned forward. No one's ever ready to lose everything. That's why we stopped caring about your rules. We lost cities, families, entire bloodlines. So we broke the math, Quan added. We didn't evolve. We got angry, then we got smart, McKay's voice echoed from below. Coolant cycle restored. You're green to drop again. Cade keyed in their descent trajectory. Plot us a hole straight through their remaining carrier. Minimum burn. Give them a close look. As Ranger 1 began its second burn into lower orbit, the alien fleet scrambled. Some vessels turned to flee, others powered weapons, but they were no longer coordinated. And in space, hesitation was death. A squadron of retooled atmospheric fighters, built from pre-war museum models, retrofitted with gravity drives, sliced between the carriers. One of them, a rust-colored relic called the Independence, detonated. A fusion mine mid-flight, taking 3 enemy vessels with it. Sacrifices were not rare among Earth's new defenders. Martyrdom had become a strategy. Cade didn't blink. He had long run out of tears. 3 minutes until fleet collapse, Quan said. Incoming hail from one of the flagship remnants. New voice. Patch it. The comm crackled. This voice was older, not military, diplomatic. Tired. This is Envoy Varix of the Council's outer core. We were not informed. This escalation is catastrophic. There are protocols. Cade. Cut him off. We stopped following your protocols when your ships glassed Nairobi. Varix tried again. We can discuss reparations. Status review. A ceasefire. We're past words. You declared Earth finished. You're only just beginning to understand what that cost you. The line went dead. Outside the viewport, Ranger 1 descended through the debris field left by the shattered Ninth Fleet. Flames licked space. Metal twisted in slow agony. Ships once deemed indestructible floated in ruin. Granger's voice, low and gravelly, rumbled through the cabin. You think they'll call off the rest? Cade didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared at the remains of the enemy formation. The sight should have felt like victory. It didn't. It felt like a warning. They'll try something worse, he said finally. They always do when the mask comes off. Quan cracked his knuckles. Then we build bigger tanks. Cade gave a small nod. And we stain them deeper. Far. Below, Earth turned slowly in the black. Still healing, still watching, still angry. And somewhere in the depths of the galaxy, something ancient stirred. Something even the Council feared, long buried, long silent. It had noticed the noise. But that reckoning wasn't today. Today belonged to Earth. The cold of deep space had never felt so claustrophobic. Inside the command module of Ranger 1, silence pressed against the crew like a second atmosphere. After the orbital massacre, after the Council's Ninth Fleet was shattered and scattered, like broken bone across the upper edge of Earth's gravity well, no one celebrated. There wasn't time, and there wasn't satisfaction in surviving a war you didn't start. The tanks rolled on. Elias Cade stood over the tactical console, watching the strategic map bleed red. The AI stitched fragmented data from compromised satellites into something barely legible. Pieces of dead cruisers still rained into the Pacific. Some of them were glowing, some were screaming. His jaw tightened. How many landed intact? He asked without looking up. 7, McKay answered, wiping coolant fluid from her cheek with the back of a scorched glove. 4 in Eurasia, 3 in the Americas. One's trying to tunnel through the Rockies. And the locals? Scattered, shocked, but armed. People are hitting back with farm drones and museum rifles, even a few black market plasma rigs. They're not waiting for us anymore. Granger grunted approval. Good. About time Earth learned to fight like cockroaches. Small, fast, hard to kill. They're still civilians, Quan said, flicking a control tab to deploy an orbital scan drone. And those aren't just troop transports. One of the cruisers opened up in Brazil, dropped walkers, 2-story mech frames, auto-firing plasma. Lances, civilians don't last long against that. We're not civilians, Cade said. We're bait. He tapped a coordinate on the screen. A ridge in western Argentina, sparse terrain, limited infrastructure. Perfect line of sight. Route the nearest tanks there. If they want to land walkers, we'll show them what real ground war looks like. The strategy wasn't complicated. Earth couldn't outnumber the Empire. Couldn't out-tech them. But it didn't have to. It just had to draw them in, isolate them, and break them, one bite at a time. Like wolves, like insurgents, like people who'd had nothing left to lose since their skies were set on fire. The AI confirmed the deployment. 3 modified tanks, each one a Frankenstein of scorched steel, alien alloys, and human ingenuity, reached the ridge within the hour. They weren't pretty, but they were nightmares. The cruisers came low. Too low. From space they'd seemed untouchable. But Earth had gravity, weather, jagged terrain, 1,000 hiding places, and tanks that moved like phantoms, not machines. The first walker hit the ground with a thunderclap, 12 meters tall, quad-legged, energy bristling across a forward-mounted arc cannon. The second followed. Then the third. Then everything went quiet. For 8 seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. Then the tanks erupted from behind a shatter line of basalt and opened fire, but they didn't aim for the walkers. They aimed for the Earth. Buried charges, mined from a collapsed Council research vessel, reconfigured with human madness, detonated under the walkers' legs. The explosion didn't just cripple them, it sliced them from the ankles up, folding one into the next like dominoes. Screams echoed, not from humans. From within the walkers themselves. Biological interface, McKay said grimly, watching the feeds. Those aren't robots. They're piloted, hardwired. Then we just hit a nerve, Granger muttered. The walkers spasmed, even as they collapsed, leaving trails of what looked like blood and light in the snow. The cruisers above hesitated. For a moment it looked like they might retreat. Then the plasma rain started. Bolts tore the ridge open. One of the tanks exploded in a fireball that took a quarter of the hillside with it. The 2 others retreated. Under heavy fire, shielding themselves with redirected blast plates, the ground turned glassy and cracked beneath them. Cade didn't flinch. He was watching something else. The orbital path of another cruiser. This one was different. Bigger, slower. He recognized the markings. That's not a warship, he said. That's a Council envoy vessel. Quan blinked. They're sending a diplomat into this? No, they're sending a witness. The cruiser didn't engage, didn't fire. It hovered, recorded, observed. Cade toggled to the encrypted channel linked to Earth Command. They want to know how bad we've become. Let's show them. In orbit, the envoy ship watched as Earth's counteroffensive erupted into full form. Not just in Argentina, all over the planet. Cities struck in the first invasion wave now roared with activity. Resistance networks emerged from underground, literal and figurative, armed with everything from converted mining lasers to reverse-engineered gravity whips. Drones launched from cargo planes, tanks rolled out of decoy warehouses. Every inch of Earth had become a weapon, and still the Council hesitated. Inside their cold metal sanctuaries layered in protocol and centuries of rigid hierarchy, the alien leadership reeled. Councillor Varick sat in the primary observation chamber aboard the envoy ship, staring at the feed. Hundreds of battles, all playing out in real time. Some won, some lost, but every one of them defied logic. They shouldn't be able to coordinate. Like this, he said aloud, not without a central node, not with fractured species loyalties. They lack neural sync. Their atmospheric interference should make uplinks impossible. He turned to the hybrid standing beside him. An artificially bred diplomatic translator, half machine, half organic, designed to observe without bias. It said nothing, but its pupil dilation suggested confusion. Maybe awe. No species could evolve that fast, Varix whispered. Not unless... Unless what? Unless grief was an accelerant, unless hatred was a fuel source, unless Earth's true. Genius had always been improvisation under fire. He zoomed in on a tank rolling through the carcass of a council deployment zone. It was coated in red. Blood? Paint? Symbols scrolled across it in dozens of languages. Not military insignia, names, entire cities etched in metal, memorials and threats in the same breath. This is not war, Varix muttered. This is cultural combustion. The hybrid finally spoke. They're not fighting to win. They're fighting to make sure you never try again. Down below, Cade's tank rumbled toward another hot zone. The atmosphere was thick with smoke and ionized plasma. Ash coated the surface of his viewport, but the path was clear enough. They were intercepting another drop. Smaller craft this time. Special operatives. Probably elite strike units meant to cut the head off the resistance before it grew, but they were too late. The humans had no head. No single point of failure. They were cells, packets, tribes of vengeance linked by encrypted thought and unbreakable will. And they were learning. Cade routed power to forward shielding. Intercept pattern. We pin them in the gorge. Let the drones finish the cleanup. Granger cocked his plasma rifle, loading another clip. We'll give 'em a welcome. Make sure. They send the footage to Grandma. McKay patched the coolant line back into the main junction and sealed the panel. We're ready for hell. They dropped into the gorge as the first elite squad arrived. Slender, fast-moving bipedal units with cloaking tech and rail-based weaponry. Agile. Deadly. Trained in precision decapitations. None of them were ready for the kind of war Earth was fighting. The tanks opened fire with modified burst shells, scattering micro-drone swarms that overloaded visual sensors. McKay triggered a high-pulse EM surge that fried every unshielded implant within range. Granger dismounted and went hand-to-hand, tearing one operative's mask off mid-combat. The alien beneath didn't look so terrifying up close. It looked tired, confused, afraid. You expected savages, Granger whispered. You got survivors. Cade watched the feed as the last of the strike team fell. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just waited for the next wave, and above them, in silence, the council envoy turned its cameras off, not out of disinterest, out of fear, because now they understood something no equation had accounted for. Earth wasn't a planet. It was a crucible, and they'd thrown the wrong kind of spark. Back inside Ranger 1, Quan leaned back in his seat. We've got eyes on us again. Council ships in high orbit, not moving, just watching. Cade exhaled slowly. Good. Let them look. Granger wiped his blade. You think they're getting it now? They're starting to. McKay slid into her seat, exhausted, grease-stained, but burning with purpose. Then let's keep teaching. Outside, across what was once a peaceful ridge, alien tech smoldered under human boots. Smoke twisted into the clouds. In the distance, a child, face hidden by a repurposed gas mask, climbed onto the back of a broken walker and painted a human. Flag across it, in red. Not blood. Not this time. Paint. Because now the message wasn't vengeance. It was warning. And the galaxy had just been served notice. The council chamber was never meant to be loud. It was engineered for symmetry and silence, a sanctum of absolute order, where voices were measured like weight on a scale. But now, it cracked with noise. Voices clashed in multiple languages, some sonar, some ultraviolet pulse, overlapping in a desperate chaos unbecoming of their reputation. Order was unraveling, not in the streets, but in the minds of those who once ruled them. Varric stood at the center of it all, eyes locked on the hologram rising from the projection well. A human tank, crimson-streaked, charred, triumphant, frozen. Mid-frame as it rolled past the wreckage of what had been the elite legionnaires of the Ascendant Path. Units never defeated. Now rendered inert, torn open like eggshells. Not destroyed, humiliated. "This image is being broadcast across 58 member systems," one delegate hissed, silken and sharp. "Do you know what that does to our deterrence metrics?" Varix didn't answer. He was still watching the tank. Not the machine, those were crude by council standards, but the paint, the words, entire cities etched into armored plating like prayers and threats carved into tombstones. Language wasn't just communication. For humans, it was ammunition. "They are barbaric," another delegate snapped. "And worse, they adapt without calibration. We offered surrender. They answered with escalation. What drives a species like this?" "Memory," Varix murmured. "What?" He looked up, voice clear now. "It's not about victory for them, it's about remembering the cost, over and over, until forgetting is no longer possible." He turned off the projection. The room dimmed. No one spoke. The silence now wasn't engineered, it was earned. Back on Earth, Cade moved through the ruins of what had once been a Council-forward operating base, now gutted and stripped. Every panel peeled open, every circuit rerouted into something crude but effective. The Resistance didn't just destroy, they harvested, learned, repurposed. It was human nature to find utility in the bones of former masters. A child handed him a drone core, glowing faintly, heat-venting with a slow rhythm. She didn't speak, just pointed to the field where McKay was working, piecing together another sensor disruptor from a blend of alien relays and 3D-printed clamps. Cade nodded his thanks and moved on. The child disappeared into the haze. Above him, Earth's atmosphere was changing. The orbital layer, once dominated by Council warships, was now a jagged graveyard of burned-out hulls and drifting tech. But nestled between the debris were something new. Satellites, human-designed, human-programmed, but running on stolen alien energy cores. They weren't broadcasting peace. They were broadcasting proof. Quan sat in the mobile command rig, flipping through intercepted transmissions. Council panic, routed through black channels, was spiking. Civil unrest in their client systems. Minor rebellions flaring in territories once secured by simple presence. The Council had ruled through assumption, but assumptions couldn't stop images from spreading, and Earth had turned war into a signal. "They're unraveling," he muttered. Granger leaned over his shoulder. "So what's their move? Double down? Pull back?" "They're too proud for retreat, too disoriented for escalation." "Then they'll try something worse." Diplomacy, it came the next morning. A projection, not a ship. Just light and arrogance beamed into the atmosphere via one of the remaining orbital lenses. The image stretched across the sky like a god's ultimatum. Varix's face, unblinking, unmarred, unreadable. "People of Earth," the voice echoed, synthetic and serene, "you have demonstrated resilience, resourcefulness, resistance beyond calculated probability. The Galactic Council recognizes your autonomy. We extend this declaration as a formal cessation of hostilities." No one clapped. No one cheered. The message wasn't peace. It was permission. Cade watched it play from the side of a scorched bunker, his tank humming beside him like a resting beast. "They think we care about their permission," McKay said, crossing her arms. "Cute." "They're scared," Quan added. "But not beaten. Not yet." "They're buying time," Granger said, "trying to look generous before they come back with something worse." "They won't come back the same way," Cade said. "They know tanks won't work. Ships won't work, so they'll go for mines. Culture, influence, that's the next front." Quan nodded grimly. "Then we hold that line, too." It wasn't strategy anymore. It was doctrine. The Council's offer of peace, such as it was, ignited something Earth hadn't expected. Fracture. Not among humans, but among their watchers. Systems under Council dominion began to question. Why offer peace to a planet supposedly broken? Why not finish it? And then came the footage. Not Earth's, theirs. Council ships under mutiny. Civilian rebellions in the Virex quadrant. A flotilla of Council freighters hijacked by their own navigators and redirected toward Earth, seeking asylum. Cade watched it unfold from the command interface, eyes narrowed. The galaxy wasn't bending, it was buckling. They weren't just fighting for Earth anymore, they were becoming something bigger. The hybrid diplomat, half organic, half code, materialized again in Earth's upper orbit, this time not to demand or declare, but to ask, "What do you intend?" it said, projected into the command bunker, voice barely audible above the wind outside. Cade answered without hesitation. "You wanted us broken, we rebuilt. You wanted us compliant, we evolved. Now we want you to understand, you don't get to erase a species and walk away." We offered apology. "No," Cade said, stepping forward. "You offered silence, packaged as mercy." The hybrid blinked, too human a gesture for something not quite alive. "Then what is your answer?" Cade turned to the live feed of Earth's recovery, tanks being cleaned, repainted not with vengeance, but memory. Cities building again, not with peace in mind, but warning. "Our answer is simple," he said. "We remember, and we prepare." The hybrid's image flickered, processing. "Prepare for what?" Cade glanced at the stars above. Cold, crowded, full of watchers who had stayed silent too long. For whoever's coming next, the projection vanished. Later that night, Granger stood at the edge of a crater once made by a council bomb. The hole hadn't been filled in, instead it had been lined with armor plating, turned into an amphitheater of war stories etched in steel. Kids came there now, families, veterans, not to mourn, to learn. The war wasn't over, it had just changed. Back. At Ranger 1, McKay finished rerouting the new solar capacitor. "Power grid's up, drone network stabilized. We've got eyes on every sky now." Quan dropped into a chair beside her. "Council's been quiet for 20 hours. That's a record." Granger joined them, tossing down his helmet. "Quiet. Doesn't mean safe?" "No," Cade agreed, walking in, "but it means they're listening." He placed a data core on the table. Recovered from a downed envoy ship. Still encrypted, but human AI was already chewing through it. "Anything good?" McKay asked. "Depends," Cade said. "Depends on how much of the galaxy's still lying to itself." Outside, the night bloomed with starlight and wreckage. Satellites shimmered, ships patrolled, and tanks, scratched, scorched, but still standing, rested on the ridges. Earth hadn't just survived the Empire. It had given the stars something new to fear. Not its power, its patience. Because for all the Council's might, for all their science, and fleets in history, they'd forgotten the one thing Earth never would. The war had never been about who fired first. It was about who remembered longest.